anyway, super stoked about. I mean, we've had some great guests, but
Yes.
I have really just been excited about having our guest on, Stephanie Quick, and we were wrapping up our March On series.
Yes.
And so we've been for the past 2.5 months. Much of our focus is on eschatology, on the return of Christ, the challenges we're going to face with our faith and standing firm. But as we've shared over and over these past 2.5 months, hearing well done, my good and faithful servant. Standing firm is not just standing firm. It's not just making this decision to take a bold stance and not give up, but it's also marching on. It's participating in the Great Commission.
Yes.
I mean, and so we've hammered that. But I was hoping that we could close that out with Stephanie, because so many times I've ran across articles and work that she's done talking about a message and a mission worth our lives. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation. She's here in the virtual green room. And so this is a miracle that this is happening. We're coming at you from 4 time zones, one of them international, but we're making it happen. And so, hey, I'm taking up time. Shirley, why don't you tell about our guest, and we'll bring her in.
Oh, yes. Stephanie Quick is a writer and producer serving with Frontier Alliance International. She lives in the Golan Heights and is the founder of A Walking Mirrors and co-hosts the Better Beautiful podcast, along with FAI Director Jeff Henderson. I'm so excited that Stephanie's here. I can't wait to hear about some of the examples that inspire her, and bring Stephanie on. Let's get this party going. I really want to hear from her. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, all. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for doing this and helping us make it work out. It's been of course trying to get it happening. And so we shared a little bit about what you do in your bio, but I know if I tried to, I've been having a hard time just wrapping my mind around all that you do. And so that I don't butcher it anymore, can you tell us what you do?
Yeah, I think so I've been with Frontier Alliance International since the beginning, back when we could fit the whole organization in a small minivan, and so when you're pioneering something, you wear a lot of hats, you do a lot of things. So FAI has 3 mandates that we've been laboring to build and prioritize for the last 10 years. International recruitment and advocacy, regional training and mobilization, all 4 local evangelism and discipleship. And so international recruitment and advocacy almost always necessitates media, because we're in the 21st century. So most of my job description, or things that I bear responsibility for or have borne responsibility for in the past, are in the international bucket. But it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. Well, I know many of the people viewing keep up with you and keep up with Frontier Alliance International. I mean, when you talk about media, you guys do a tremendous job. You also have founded Walking Mirrors. I've caught some of your podcast episodes on that. And you're doing one of the best jobs I see, bringing creativity and artistry. And Sherilyn, I've got to get you hooked up with this, because this show actually began with Sherilyn's a writer, and she called me one day and said, "Hey, Jake, with the things coming up prophetically and these things, I'm not sure if some of these projects are projects I should be doing." And she says, "Let's have a conversation about that." And then that conversation said, we ought to do that where other people can hear more about it. And so that's where all this came from. But so Sherilyn, you've got to check this out. But I mean, talk a bit about just the creativity aspect and the artistry that I think you're connecting with mission.
Well, I was really encouraged and provoked by the earliest example that I've found in Scripture for creativity in the arts is in the Exodus, and the Lord has led the Israelites out of Egypt. They're in the wilderness, and He's given the blueprints for the tabernacle to Moses, and He says, "I've actually appointed B.S.L.L. and Aholiab as artists." He said, "I've poured my spirit out on B.S.L.L. and I've anointed Aholiab to help B.S.L.L. to be like, this is a team that I've built." And who knows what they were doing in slavery in Egypt. We don't know if they were like standard bricklayers, or if it was like they just had God-given skills that came forth, and maybe Egyptian powers that be were like, "Hey, we're gonna pull you into this department. And it was actually a way where the Lord could sharpen their skill set somehow, because in the wilderness, they had what they needed as artisans, and they were, quote, gifted as artisans by the Lord, which means it's a priority for the Lord to have craftsmen and artisans to build the tabernacle. So when the Lord, first told Abraham, you're going to have kids, they're going to go into slavery for 4 centuries, and then when they come out, they're going to plunder the nation that enslaved them. And they did, as they left the Exodus. 400 years later, all of this comes to pass. They plundered Egypt. So they have all those just buckets of gold and jewels and whatever, fabrics. And, this is, the Exodus broke the back of the strongest nation on the earth at that time, and transferred the wealth to this burgeoning nation. Even now in Israel, every year when we have Pesach, it's remembering the birth of the nation. And in that time, in this transitional generation, the Lord prioritized building something beautiful and anointed artisans and craftsmen to build something beautiful for the nation to encounter and experience the Lord in the context of what he was doing in that generation. And so I think, an example that we hear a lot is the word of the Lord in Isaiah's generation was, "Say in Jerusalem, I'll deliver you." The word of the Lord in Jeremiah's generation was, "Flee Jerusalem, I will not deliver you. You're going into exile." So I think having the discernment to know the word of the Lord endures forever, broad strokes. The word of the Lord specifically in a generation can be different than what your grandfather quoted, than what he said to your grandparents. And so we need to be able to look at where we are in the, redemptive thread of God's eternal purposes. What is the Spirit saying to the churches in this hour, in this generation? And what do we need to build for our nations and our communities and our families to encounter and behold the Lord in this time? And I don't think that that's limited to artists and craftsmen, but I do think that there is something, there's a very unique dignity that the Lord has given to creatives and to artists. Therefore, a almost burdensome responsibility that, frankly, I think we squander more than we leverage. So Walking Mirrors is really just a resource stream. It might only ever be a podcast. It might grow to something beyond a podcast or articles, but just something to begin to articulate values that call artists and creatives higher than I think what we've been doing now.
Yeah. Oh, and it's tremendous. And we're off script. And so that didn't take long. We right off, we went off script. That wasn't in the plan. But as I was praying about it this morning, I feel like when we talk about getting in the Great Commission, I think a lot of times, sometimes we have aspects where we kind of can, I guess, kind of make excuses for us not to do certain things. But but at the same time, there's also different giftings and different aspects that we can bring into that sometimes we don't think that we can bring into that. I know growing up in church, when I first started in ministry, it was, I felt like a creative person and wasn't able to use that. And I had the opportunity to intern under a pastor who was very creative, and it really unlocked me to be able to bring some of that into ministry. And it was huge, but I had to have somebody invite me into that, like in a sense. And I think as we're talking about our roles and participating, I mean, I hope people out there listening and watching this can hear that your gifting has a purpose. I mean, God didn't give you that by accident, but it can be used for his cause, which is what you're doing with Walking Mirrors.
I do hope.
Yeah,
I'm going to start listening, because I really do feel that creativity is to glorify our Creator. And look what he did at the beginning. He created. And he said it was, when he created us, he said it was very good.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, we've been focused here on hearing "Well done, my good and faithful servant," and talking about not just standing firm, but also being on mission, participating in the Great Commission, making disciples. You're doing this on the front line in what many would seem to be a dangerous place. You've written a lot about the spread of the gospel being worth our lives. Others say it, but I think it means more for someone who's doing it, who's where you're at. And could you share why you've devoted your life the way you have, and how disciple making is worth all of our lives?
Yes.
I don't mean this in a trite way, but really, I encountered the Lord in college in a way that, like, the conversation that Jesus has with the disciples, and like he does the thing where he feeds the crowds, and sorry, one of my Bluetooth things just disconnected, freaked me out, but y'all can still hear me, yeah?
Yes.
But he's just fed the crowds, and they're following him because they're hungry, and he does cool things and provides for them, and then he stopped. He's like, "Look, you wanna roll with me? You got to eat my flesh and drink my blood." And then they're all like, "Okay, you just got weird. Like, you just went from like cool to cult leader, and we're not following you anymore." And the disciples are like, he turns to them and he goes, "Are you guys gonna bail too?" And they're like, Peter goes, "What else are we gonna do? You have the words of life. Like, we've burned all of our bridges." She says, "We have nothing left." And that's kind of what happened to me. But to be honest, I thought I was going to end up somewhere like Nashville with a studio. I did not see myself in the Middle East, but it was like I had breadcrumbs in front of me on the path of obedience, and I would go to one breadcrumb at a time. And then one day I was waking up in Iraq during the ISIS years, like, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I say it all the time. It's like when you just step out in obedience, the Lord will lead you to an epic life. I mean, we may not be something we may write a book about, but I mean, you're going to experience life unlike anywhere else. And you definitely sounds like you've done that with the journey you've been on.
Yeah. Well, one of the dads in the FAI ecosystem says, like, when he was kind of choosing what he's going to do with his life, he thought, I wanted to give myself to something that's eternal. And now it's still what drives him. He said, that's the word of God and the souls of man. So, this could be anywhere that you are. The Lord's agenda in this age is to exalt and elevate the name and worth of Jesus. If the Son of Man is lifted up, then he draws all men to himself. It's not that he's like a narcissist that needs to be stared at. It's that this draws all men to himself. All men. Yes. I don't care if you're in Iowa or Istanbul or Azerbaijan. All men everywhere exalt the Son of Man. And so, that doesn't. I think that there are strategic ways to do that, and I think that there are stupid ways to do that. I also know that the message is better and more important than the messenger. And even, this is why Paul could say from jail in Rome or whatever, when he was writing to the Philippians, like, look, I understand that these guys are preaching the gospel out of ego and selfish ambition, but at the end of the day, the gospel is getting preached. But he could say to the Galatians, look, those guys aren't preaching the gospel to you. If I came back and told you something else, you could curse them, curse me, curse an angel of light. That gives you a different message. So the priority is the message. And God can breathe on weakness. And thank God that he breathes on weakness. But, for some people, that means that you're in the Middle East. For other people, it means you're in the Midwest. Whatever. Go ye therefore and teach men to obey all that I've commanded you.
I love what you
David,
said.
mark the tape.
God breathes on weakness.
Stupidly. Mark the tape.
God breathes on weakness. I love that because he created out of dirt. He breathed on dirt. And you gave me the chills. I'm going to quote you. God breathes on weakness. I just, yes. And Paul,
you quote that, the very, the great one liner, but I'm sticking with the strategic versus stupid.
You just look at his creation and
I'm here all week.
I mean, he uses his creation. I mean, that's Paul knew that. And, when I am weak, he is strong. He breathes on weakness.
No,
thank you.
Tremendous.
We both got something different out of that, but that's
no, I got both of it. So, Stephanie, some of the work that you've done. I mean, I know you produced the film The Frontier. I've seen you write and talk a lot about Hudson Taylor. What are some historical examples that have motivated you to follow these breadcrumbs to end up where you're at?
You know, in the early days of FAI, I was reading a ton of biographies because I was kind of like,
Yes.
what did I just get myself into? And the first one that I read, not at the sort of start of that bend in the journey, was St. Patrick's autobiography. And he was reflecting on the time that, you know, so this is a kid who's born into wealth and affluence. He's exposed to the church, whether like his dad and his grandfather were like elders or bishops or something, and it could have been for a tax break, it could have been sincere, but he's exposed. He describes himself as a godless 14-year-old pagan. And he's kidnapped by Irish pirates, taken to Ireland, forced into slavery on a farm for upwards of 6 years. So now he's a young man. But in that time, he developed started to call him the God. And, you know, so they nicknamed him Holy Boy, kind of as a derogatory thing, but he was known as like the kid who's often, he's a David on the back hills of Bethlehem praying. And then one night he has a dream, the Lord gets him home, he goes back home, he sees his parents again, they think he's dead. So they're like weeping, they're like, you won't ever leave again. He's like, no, I'm not going anywhere, you know, I just got home. And then he trains for the priesthood, enters ministry, and is doing really well. He's approaching what we would call middle age, but it's, you know, this is like the 4th century or 5th century. So the life expectancy is not super long. And he has a dream effectively wherein the Lord is calling him to go preach the gospel in Ireland, to go back to the land of his oppression and slavery and serve his enemies with the gospel, because the gospel had stopped at the Irish Sea. Nobody was going beyond Great Britain. The Roman Empire stopped because they thought the Irish are barbarians. You know, they can't read, they're just violent, they're not even worth it. So who does that sound like on our maps nowadays? And they didn't think that it was a worthy enterprise. And he made a list of pros and cons. Like, here are all of the reasons why I will never go back to Ireland and I will never leave my home again. Like, his education was aborted. He was always a little bit insecure about being a bit illiterate, and he needed it, you know, to be able to teach the Bible. Why would I go back to this place? And he said, but then he wrote down, you know, reasons to go to Ireland. He said, I had all these reasons to stay in, you know, Scotland or whatever. And I had no reason to go save for the gospel and God's promises. And it outweighed everything.
Wow.
And then I encountered John G. Payton's autobiography as well. And he had been, he was alive in Scotland in the 1800s. And when he was about in college, like 19, 20 years old, 2 guys were martyred in Erromango, in the chain of what is now Vanuatu. And as word traveled, they were speared, eaten, you know, cannibalized. And so word gets back to Britain and the London Missionary Society and stuff, and the effort in the South Pacific dries up within single-digit years. Nobody wants to get cannibalized. So Payton's like burdened. He said, Christ has now baptized those islands with the blood of his martyrs, thereby declaring to the whole Christian world that he has claimed them as his own. Not even to the world, you know, to the Christian world. And he was like, God has an inheritance there, and it's our job to go harvest it. And nobody's going to do that if you stay here like a coward. So he starts saying, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Erromango. He's got a thriving youth ministry in the inner city of Glasgow. So he's like, I have a cush job. I could stay. It's worthy work. It's good work to do. But if I leave here, 40 young men will line up and take my place, but nobody is going to Erromango. So he starts to announce, I'm going to go back to Erromango. And everybody is like, his family, interestingly, is like Hudson Taylor's parents. They're like, actually, before we got pregnant with you, we asked the Lord for a son and committed you to ministry and committed you to the field. We just didn't tell you that. We've just been praying to that end your whole life. And that same thing, that same conversation happened with Hudson Taylor and his parents, because they wanted to go to China and couldn't. So they said, Lord, give us a son. We'll commit him to China. And so Payton starts to say, I'm going to go to Erromango. Everybody except his parents oppose him. And this older gentleman in his, I don't know, church context, ministry context, would just berate him and argue with him to discourage him from doing it. And he never really had, you know, he tried to like have his points and talk him out of it. But anytime, you know, Payton's not budging, he's going. So things are beginning to escalate emotionally. And at one point, this older gentleman erupts and he goes, "But the cannibals, Payton, if you go, you will be eaten by cannibals." And Payton, God bless him, looks at him and says, "Mr. Dixon, you are old and advanced in years, and soon your own prospect will be laid in the grave, there to be eaten by worms. And whether I'm eaten by worms or by cannibals, you and I are going to be raised to the same degree of glory in the day of the resurrection."
Oh, wow.
So thank you, sir. I'm going to Erromango. We went down there for decades, and it was brutal work, but fruitful, and worthwhile. And so I thought of Payton immediately when John Allen Chau was killed on North Sentinel Island a few years ago. And I thought he's the seed. Christ has now baptized those islands with the blood of the martyrs, thereby declaring to the whole Christian world that he's claimed them as his own. I think it was the like the highest gauntlet. And I think his life and death was the Lord. Like, forget the world. The world they don't. If you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. But for the church and the body of Jesus that carries that mandate, we all have the same commission. Nobody gets a hall pass to duck out of the Great Commission. I think Chau's life was leveraged in a way that the Lord would confront us with our obscene priorities. Because when he died, he mostly got criticized by the church publicly. And I think the Lord was like, "Look, I'm super serious about this. So I want to get all y'all's attention and tell you that I am going to find these people and I am going to go after them. And if you join me, if you think I'm worth it. And if you don't, you're going to mock those who do. But the cowards don't enter the kingdom."
Wow.
Okay, there's so many tape markings there. Your highlighter's going to run out there, David. So I really began following you after I read an article you had about John Allen Chau, and I probably butchered his name there, but who was killed on North Sentinel Island, taking the gospel. And what I was shocked with is that just hearing from other believers, friends, who just were like, "Why would he do this day and age? I mean, he knew better. I mean, why would he do that?" And I mean, to me, like those historical accounts that you're talking about, I think of the Elliots. I guess that's probably what I'm most familiar with. This to me is what we're ultimately called to do. But I was shocked to hear the feedback of just the confusion about that. And you had written, I know I've written at least one article I ran across that had a good run. I mean, could you speak to that? I mean, help us understand a bit about that in this day and age. I mean, someone risking their life to that point, because I think that's something that it seems to be most believers don't equate to our call.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just realizing that was 3 years ago this month. It was November 2018.
Wow.
And, right? 18, 19.
Yeah.
As I said at the start, I'm bad at math. I can't do time zones and I can't count years.
It was 2018. So yeah, November 17th, 2018. Yes. There we go. Yeah. When we published that article, we didn't really realize that we were wading into a snake pit until, especially because we're on this side of the Atlantic. So we go to sleep and then we wake up in the morning, we just see Facebook and we're like, "Oh my word, do y'all not have a hobby?" Like, and the incredible criticism that he came under immediately reminded me of Mary of Bethany pouring everything she had out on Jesus, breaking what was probably her dowry, or like, we don't know anything about her parents. So this is probably her only financial security for the future. She busts it and pours it out over Jesus to anoint him for his burial, because she's the only one in the room who has a glimmer of revelation on what's going on. She knew that the Lord of resurrection would himself be resurrected, and therefore the Lord of the resurrection would himself he would die. So she starts to anoint him for his death, because she's, I think the penny dropped for her when he pulled Lazarus out of the tomb. And then the next time she saw him, she's probably like, "I don't know what the window is, but I know I have a one shot." And I think we need that in our own lives. We have one shot, actually, YOLO. This is not reincarnation. You don't come circle back around the sun till you learn your lesson and like be a butterfly. You get one shot. And I think John felt that way and did that. And what we see in the text when she does this, I think Matthew and John, are the ones that recorded, or Luke and John. And you have to kind of stitch it together to get the whole picture.
But she does this, and I think John, one of them says, and then one of the disciples said, "Man, why this waste? That was stupid. We could have taken this $40,000 and like given it to the poor." The other gospel writer goes, "It was actually Judas, and he didn't really care about what we could do to the poor. It's just that he was in charge of the money and he was stealing from it. So he was really mad that he just missed the opportunity to, I don't know, swipe 20 grand out of the bag or whatever." And so he is confronted with the worth of Jesus, like we were. But the problem is, Judas says this. He goes, "Why this waste? That was stupid. That was foolish. You dumb girl." And every apostolic leader of the future church in the room went, "Yeah, Judas, you're right. What a stupid thing to do." Every single one of them. And Jesus had to go, "Listen, she's done a good thing for me. The poor you will have with you always," which is part of the law in Deuteronomy. You will always have the poor with you. So here's the rules on how you provide whatever. He's like, "I care about the poor more than you do, Judas." But she's like, "Guys, I have been telling you this whole time." And so Chow's death, I think, was the moment that the alabaster broke, and we turned around and saw this puddle and just heard the dripping oil, and the fragrance filled the room. And all it takes is one person on Twitter to go, "Why this waste? That was so stupid." And the hordes went, "Yeah, that's dumb." All it did was expose our offense at the worth of Jesus. We didn't actually think he was worth it. And we don't think that those people deserve the dignity of hearing about him. We don't actually think that his name is that beautiful. I don't care if pagans hear that story and get on Twitter and like yell at him for biological warfare and lob all kinds of accusations that were neither fair nor true. But I really care if there are people who confess the lordship of Jesus, who sing their songs on Sunday morning. Like Hudson Taylor said, there's thousands of people rejoicing in their own security, singing their hallelujahs, while millions are perishing for lack of knowledge, and they don't care. I think that if we're not sober by the fact that people will meet the Lord in the day of judgment and hear, "I never knew you, get away from me, but Lord, I did all of these cool ministry initiatives in your name." And he goes, "I never knew you." We want to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." We don't want to hear, "I don't know who you are."
That's powerful. We only have like a minute and a half, and
we're gonna have to go in a couple minutes of overtime because I got to get this question in because you just opened the door of this.
Yes.
I mean, you basically told us, but let's take another round with it. What advice would you give for someone to increase their heart for the nations?
Yes.
A heart like John Allen Chow had.
I think Mike Bickle, God love him. He says, I come to the place of prayer and I say, "Holy Spirit, let me see what you see. Let me feel what you feel." Eventually, you're going to start to care about people around you.
Yes. That's I have to say, when I started praying that myself, my heart started breaking for the lost, or my heart started breaking for my brothers and sisters who weren't standing firm, like you said, and my heart broke for the lost. And my prayer went from selfish prayers to, "Lord, just give me one per day. Just give me one to talk to about you." And it's such a powerful, I mean, what I'm convicted, I'm encouraged, and I've got chills by what you have said today. Really. Thank you so much. So much insight.
Yeah. Isn't this, I mean, this is the perfect way to top off where we've spent two and a half months talking about marching on, because how you said it. I mean, the value of Christ, the value, the dignity of others coming to know him. The teaching that aired last night called Great Commission Leverage. I began with the process of just saying, hey, we know the Lord said night is coming, so we need to work while we can. COVID definitely showed us a night that slowed things down. And I think here in the West, there's going to come a time when, the freedom and wealth that we have, we can't no longer leverage for the kingdom. So that was the plan. But when I was studying and preparing, I saw the statistics of how much the church, I mean, the Western church, is spending locally versus to unreached people groups, the manpower.
Yes.
And we're not doing it
it's
now.
appalling.
And
yeah.
I just have been sick. I'm still sick in my stomach from that, but it comes down to what you're saying. We saw that in the response with John on the Child, as we said, and just seeing the value of Christ. But you also touched on having this heart for the nations. I think my heart is that we would all flip our default to, I'll go if God twists my arm, to we should desire to be on the front line, but we always need to bloom where we're at in the Great Commission. I mean,
totally.
how could you encourage to just bloom where we're at?
Hudson Taylor, again, one of the things that's always encouraged us about him is that when he committed as a 16, 17-year-old kid to enter and pursue medical school, get a medical degree so that he could go to China, he immediately started living as though he were in China. He walked everywhere. He is like, I don't do this. If I have like a fast coming up, I feast. But he started eating a ton of rice, like just started shifting his diet so that when he got there, it wasn't as difficult, to do it. So it's a silly example, but an example, like if you're not doing it where you are, you're not going to do it on the field. So I would really encourage people, to plug in with our friends with Sheep Among Wolves. Go to sheepamongwolves.world and plug in. They're doing a ton of training in the States right now. If you're like, I want to talk to my neighbors about the Lord, but I don't know how to do that. Or like, all my friends are Christian. How do I find, like, I got really challenged years back. The leader of that group said, pull out your phone and go through your contacts and tell me how many people are not Christians. 90% should be unbelievers. And I was like, oh,
90%. Whoa.
Convicted.
Yeah. And people are like, I don't know how to do it. He goes, but you go buy coffees, don't you? You go to the same gas station, don't you? You go to the same grocery store, don't you? Just start talking to people. But we go to self-checkout lanes because we don't actually want to talk to anybody.
Yes. And
listen, I'll say this, and then you guys can shut me up and let me go. The early criticism of the second wave of the missions movement, just before Hudson Taylor and William Carey, because they shifted this, was that in the days of colonialism and imperialism, these empires and geopolitical powers took the Great Commission and exploited it they couched it in colonialism to get away with what they were doing, to sanctify what they were doing. And so Hudson Taylor came on the scene and he was like, you're not coming here to teach these Chinese people how to be English. That's ridiculous. Right. You want to live here, you wear their clothes, you learn their language, you eat their food, and you get away from your little bubbles and your colonies on the coastland. If you're going to live in China, live in China. If you're going to live in England, live in England. And so I think I look at, the state today, the church today, that I get like gather together corporately, worship, pray, fast, fellowship, all of these things. Like I hear all of these things. I care deeply about there being an expression of the community and fellowship of disciples everywhere. So I'm not saying be a lone ranger, but I am saying if I hear somebody go, I just quote, do life and run with these people who all believe exactly the same thing that I do. And if the Lord showed up at the foot of your bed tonight and said, who are you discipling? You go, oh, well, so-and-so. You go, cool. He already obeys me. So what exactly do you think you have to offer? Like, you're not obeying me. Go teach somebody everything I have commanded you. I don't know anybody. Go find them. Go fishing. It's actually not that hard.
Go fishing.
Go fishing. Just don't be a jerk. Just be nice to people.
That's a great way. Oh, go fishing. Let's all go fishing. You
don't build colonies. Don't build bubbles.
We got to have you back on again.
Yeah, I mean, this has just been incredible. And it's interesting. All the interviews we've done for 2.5 months, everyone we've kind of basically said this. Give us a practical step, and it's all been the same. Talk to somebody. Just talk to someone. Now you took it up notches ahead of time, so we were definitely, David, marking some tape there again. Well, but Stephanie, thank you so much. I know this message it's going to be challenged to hear. And you mentioned Sheep Among Wolves. My church locally, where I pastor, we have a Zoom setup in the coming weeks.
Oh, cool.
Where me and my leaders are meeting with them and starting the process of being trained. And it's weird. Like, so we're doing the Discovery Bible, the disciple making movement, Discover Bible stuff here locally, trying to. And I learned it from Sheep Among Wolves, from Frontier Alliance International, and so then I'm finding Western ministries that are doing it. But one thing I'm finding is they're not doing it to disciple unto, except accepting Christ. It's not that, it's just doing it to do it. And so I really encourage people to check out Sheep Among Wolves and get involved with that and have that training. Stephanie, we've gone in bonus time. I thank you for giving us that bonus time.
Yes,
how can
you.
someone, you've got so much tremendous stuff, your writings, your books, your articles, your podcast, the films with FAI. Tell us how to follow you and tell us a resource or two to check out.
Everything. We have the FAI app, but everything goes into the FAI app. So you can go to faimission.org, or type FAI or Frontier Alliance International, and wherever you get apps, and everything goes in there. So
I know I'm going to be listening to your podcast, and definitely. God bless you. Praying for you, and everybody join us next week. What's going on next week, Jake?
So next week we will be we have our guest on. So we're wrapping up the March On series completely. So this was our final March On guest. Thursday night I will be teaching lessons that we've learned throughout this time at March On. So several things. So I'll probably be just repeating this interview Thursday for that, and then we will come on. We'll do that again. We want to hear from you on that Friday to follow up with. And then we've got a special guest, Darren Huckey, who's going to be on talking about Hanukkah and why, as Gentiles, we should consider participating and being involved. And so, and he's got a devotional book called 8 Lights, where he walks you through doing it. So last year was my first year for my family to walk through it. And I have his devotional book manual there in front of me as I'm going through it. So just tremendous. So check it out. And it's done in time for you to experience Hanukkah as well. And so, a lot going on. We thank you for being here again. Again, each Monday, I'm trying to pour my heart into you guys and give you some navigational truth just to help you walk through this time. You can sign up for that down below in the notes wherever you're at. You can also find a link to the FAI app and other resources that's been mentioned here in the notes. Again, wherever, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. Again, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week.
I want to leave with a quote from our guest. No one gets a hall pass from the Great Commission. Think about that and pray on that. Goodbye.